I think we are just about to have everybody in. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our second day of our manufacturing summit. We're excited for today's panel. It's a bipartisan panel featuring Tom and his PSC co-chair, Congressman Josh Gottheimer from New Jersey. And we do have a special host with us today that's going to be asking them some questions before we get to our audience questions. We have Alon from CNBC joining us this morning as well. And in the meantime, while they're having their conversation, if anybody should have any additional questions, we want to take your questions at the end as well. So please feel free to send them directly to me, and we will make sure we get them asked this morning. Thank you. And we'll turn it over to Yolande now.
Great, Allison. Thank you so very much for that introduction. And thank you to Congressman Reed for hosting this event and for inviting me to participate. And of course, to Congressman Gottheimer as well for having this really important discussion about bipartisanship. And I'm really looking forward to our talk today because right now is a moment when I feel like our country is more divided than ever. And I'm really excited to discuss ways that we can get to a different place and actually be able to have conversations across the aisle. So of course, in addition to Congressman Reed, and Congressman Gottheimer, you guys are both the co-chairs of the Problem Solvers Caucus, a bipartisan group of lawmakers sort of devoted to finding solutions to some of the thorniest legislative problems. We're going to talk a little bit today about sort of how the Problem Solvers got started, what your mission is, what your goal is, what the challenges are. But I'd really like to start the conversation today with the big news, which is the debates last night. They were loud, they were contentious. It was extremely vitriolic. And I think that one of the reasons conversations like this is so important because a lot of people look at what happened last night and are fearful that it's really a reflection of deep political rancor within our society. And so what I would like you guys to talk about, Congressman Reed, if you could start, is, not who won or who lost or what's that going to do to the polls, but what your takeaway from the tenor of the conversation last night was, and how you think we can start to bring the temperature down. Will the temperature come down?
Well, thank you, Alon, for opportunity. Thank you for joining us. And your work at CNBC is much appreciated, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. And I appreciate my colleague, Josh Gottheimer, on the other side of the aisle, who is my best friend in Congress, joining us for this manufacturing summit. Josh, as you will find out, who we have on this summit are some of our leading entrepreneurs and folks of the district that put it all on the line each and every day. And I know you stand with small businesses, you stand with these entrepreneurs and work to advance their cause. So thank you, Josh, for being with us. And Alon, as we reflect on last night's debate, I am more committed to the work that Josh and I are doing than ever before. I join with the silent majority of America, and I think a growing voice that's awakening, saying, you know what, that's not the kind of political debate we need to have in America, nor should we have in America. The kind of debate we need to have is the one that we're leading in the Problem Solvers Caucus, where we step forward and we're proud Republicans. I'm a proud Republican. I say that very passionately. Josh is a proud Democrat. I know him. I know his soul. I know where he comes from. But what we do in the Problem Solvers Caucus is we recognize we're Americans first, and that we represent the people of the district, of the state, and of the country, and they are our priority. And so what we always do in the Problem Solvers Caucus, and we get into passionate disagreements. I mean, we have passionate debates about the issues, but we never make it personal. We never make it something where we lose respect for each other. And fundamentally, two of the things that we are committed to is we trust each other and we respect each other. And that is the kind of debate I think the American people are looking for out of Washington, D.C. And so that is what we're doing in the Problem Solvers Caucus. That's why we started it 4 years ago. And that's what we're going to continue to do. You won't see Josh and I on the floor of the House or going on CNBC or going on Fox News, or I'll go on MSNBC, with or without Josh, and he'll do the same on Fox and other channels. We get asked sometimes in the earpieces, oh, that's great. You guys are showing where you can get along and what, you're doing a deal for COVID-19. but can you tell us about the fight? Tell us where you guys disagreed with each other. Get into that fight, because that's what we want to have on TV. And we said, we're not going to do that. That's not who we are. And so I just applaud Josh Gottheimer for being the member that he is. And most importantly, just for being my friend and for walking this journey with me, because I have his back, because I know he has my back. So Josh, or Alon, I'll turn it back to you. I forgot the virtual, we're in this virtual world.
That's all right. I wanted to hear from Congressman Gottheimer as well about his thoughts.
Thanks, Alon, and thanks, Tom, for having me here today. And yes, you're my closest friend in Congress, but beyond that, and for the people on this call today, you are one heck of a legislator and someone who, whenever I talk to you, it's always about what you're doing in your district, driving around your district. There's not a time, even through COVID, as you put your mask on and drive around, there's not a time you haven't actually been in the car, in the truck, driving around the district with your $1.09 coffee from McDonald's, because that's what you get, drive through, $1.09. I know the price. It's actually more expensive if you get it here in DC. And Tom's just driving around talking to people, during COVID, it was a fight to make sure that all the hospitals had ventilators and made sure people had PPE and protective gear, and that's still the case. And then just about taking care of your businesses and your jobs. And I remember, and I don't know if you remember this, Tom, but sort of at the height of despair during those really rough months for New Jersey and New York. I'm from Jersey, and talking about how many families had lost. You were talking about this one farmer who had, lost his business and a family farm, and he just couldn't take it anymore. And how many businesses and with all the entrepreneurs and manufacturers in your district who have just had such a tough time these last months, and how committed you are to fighting for them. And I think it's frankly why besides the fact that we co-chair the problem solvers, I think it's why we're such good friends, because at the end of the day, we may have differences, but what drives you is what drives me. And I think that value set of understanding that our job is to come here and get things done and not to just scream and yell. And what was, Alon, you asked about last night, that to me was what was depressing about last night. It wasn't, we have, Democrats and Republicans, we have our policy differences. We see differently on different issues. That's okay. It's why our country's so great, the greatest country in the world. But you want to have that debate, and you wanted to actually hear the differences from a policy perspective, so you can know when they vote, what am I fighting for? What am I voting for? What am I fighting hard for to help elect somebody? What's this about? And it was just shouting and screaming, and not actually and you couldn't hear the substance of the conversation. And I feel like that was a huge disservice, to the presidency, to our country. And what we do every week when we get together, and we're working on now on COVID, but all the things that we've worked on together is actually try to figure out where we can agree and try to put aside the places we disagree. And so that we can make progress for the people we represent. The manufacturers on the call, and all the business and entrepreneurs and others on the call, you have to deliver every day. You've got to make sure you make payroll. You've got to, deliver so you can make a profit. You've got to help people, right? That's what you have to do. You just got to make it happen. You can't show up and just yell and go home, right? And we try to take the same approach. We try to actually get things done. And to me, this is what gets me motivated to come here every week to help people, because I know there's plenty of people like Tom Reed who actually are committed to getting things done.
One of the proposals that you guys put together was around coronavirus relief. There's obviously been a very, very long negotiation, a very long stalemate between Democrats and Republicans over how to deliver help to the American people and to American businesses. You guys came out with a bipartisan compromise proposal that, according to the Treasury Secretary on CNBC this morning, is forming, the basis of what the administration is going to be coming to Democrats with as a potential counterproposal. So, can you first start by walking us through what your proposal does, and then how you guys were able to get bipartisan support for it? How did your caucus come together to put this plan in place?
Well, thanks, Alon. I guess I'll go first, Josh, if that's okay.
This is your day, man. You go.
Well, we always have this give and take going back and forth, and we always do that. So as you guys will notice as we go through this, Josh and I truly are really good friends, and we spend a lot of time together. Our wives, Marla and Jean, get really frustrated with us because we're on the phone more together than I think we are talking to them at times.
Yes, my kids are just regularly saying, "Is that Tom? Is that Tom?" When I'm on the phone. Yeah.
And Ben,
and most of the time it's yes. And then Tom, Tom's a Bills fan. I'm a Giants fan. And so, and my son Ben is an obsessed football fanatic. Every stat, and decided, right? What did he tell you, Tom, the other day?
He told me we're not going to the Super Bowl, and he knew every stat about Josh Allen because he's my football advisor. So I love Ben. And anyway, so we have a good time together, but we also do we always have a high regard for Josh and his family. But on the package, I will tell you, what we did is we put this package together, what we call March for Common Ground, Alon. And I was glad to see the Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin talk about it on your CNBC on your show this morning in regards to that the White House is putting together a proposal in response to Nancy Pelosi's proposal based on what the Problem Solvers Caucus did with that March to Common Ground. And where that came from is, there's 50 of us, 25 Republicans, 25 Dems, and we were watching this gridlock between the Senate, the House, and the White House on additional relief that's needed for people back home. And they're suffering. People are suffering. I mean, we talk to our farmers, we talk to our businesses, and we talk to our schools, our child care providers. And I will just tell you that additional relief is necessary. We just saw some additional news about layoffs at Disney World, that 28,000 folks there. The airline industries have had notice of furloughs that are coming down the pipeline, but also small businesses, restaurants. You talk about the live venue associations. We got tags right in our backyard in Big Flats that's struggling. We talked with them, and I'll just tell you. So what we did is we said enough is enough, and so we said, well, why don't we show, because we're proud Republicans and Democrats, that we can come together and put a package together. And it took 6 weeks of hard negotiations, hard work. Kudos to leaders of the Problem Solvers Caucus that led this initiative, Josh, myself, and Dusty Johnson, and Abigail Spanberger, and Dean Phillips, and Anthony Gonzalez, and really rolled up their sleeves to come together, spearhead that effort with 50 members, and we got to an agreement. Because you got to remember, in the Problem Solvers Caucus, for us to issue our seal of endorsement, we have to get 75% consensus or more, where we agree, and we far surpassed that on this March for Common Ground $1.5 trillion deal that we put together. And what we did is we rolled it out a couple weeks ago when everyone said, you're fools. This isn't going to get done. There's no Corona stimulus package to put together. It's too much about politics. All they're focusing on is politics, and leadership in the White House just aren't going to be able to get this done. We said, we're not giving up, because the American people deserve for us to do our job in Congress. And so we did it. We rolled it out. Now we are members of Congress who don't believe in bomb throwing or catching people by surprise. So we kept our leadership informed, Josh, working with the Speaker's office and us working together. We kept Mitch McConnell and his team informed as to what we're working on, and working directly with the White House, Mark Meadows and Steven Mnuchin and others, and just keeping them informed as to what we were doing. And then we rolled out that proposal a couple of weeks ago. And what was dead on arrival when we returned on that Monday, by Friday, lo and behold, the Problem Solvers Caucus changed the national conversation, and we got the leaders back into the room to negotiate on this next package. And lo and behold, we had Judge Ginsburg's death that occurred. It kind of changed the political environment and calculation. But lo and behold, you saw today on your CNBC show, Mnuchin and Pelosi have been talking. And they've been continuing to talk. And that was one of our primary missions when we rolled this package out, was get back in the room, talk to each other, have a conversation, and do a deal for the American people. So we are very close. I'm more optimistic each and every day that we get close. We're not, I don't want to overpromise here. It's still a long shot. It's still something that we're recognizing the lay of the land, but we're getting closer because we force these guys to talk to each other. And so Pelosi and Mnuchin are talking, and I know McConnell's involved in these conversations. And the bottom line is with Josh's help and the Problem Solvers Caucus, we put the people first. And when you put the people first, they win, not the political class, not the political industrial complex of Washington, D.C., which is fighting to keep the status quo. So Josh.
Well, Congressman Gottheimer, let me just ask you, it seems that the Trump administration has been more amenable to the proposal you guys put out than Democratic leadership has been. The committee chairs came out and said that the proposal falls short of what the American people need. So how do you handle that within the Democratic Party, and how do you sort of navigate the political landscape?
Sorry.
You're
I have a deep respect for the committee chairs, and I've been talking to them since we first put forth our proposal. And what I've talked to them about, and members I think have started to realize, is it's not the number, the top line number, because if you looked at what we put out, it was 1.5 trillion, but it had this thing called we put in boosters and reducers depending upon in March where we are in the fight against COVID. So it could go to $2 trillion, a little over 2 trillion, or down to 1.3 trillion, depending upon where we are in the vaccine and where we are on hospitalizations in March. We also shortened the timeline for besides state and local resources. We shortened the timeline for everything. So that got to a little past the next inauguration for the next administration, regardless of party, of who's in charge, to take it on. That was able to get the number down. And if you looked at actually the priorities, as Tom talked about, what was underneath it, Lon, and this was really, I think, what was the game changer besides the secret sauce boosters and reducers, was the fact that all of the major priorities that Democrats had been fighting for were largely in what we proposed. So it was in there, it was just at a smaller number because it was over a shorter period of time. And then there were things in there, of course, that the Republicans wanted that were reasonable, that we were able to, of course, come to find common ground on. So I think in the last couple of weeks, and we're seeing this today, and Tom made this point, it's helped, I think, get people back to the table. And that to me is really what our goal was. Not to say this is the be all end all plan. It was to say, here is a framework to hopefully get the conversation moving and get folks back to the table, because they weren't talking. And I think we all agreed that it's unacceptable to go home for the elections and possibly before the next inauguration, before you can give help to the American people. Our families are hurting, our small businesses are hurting, our state and local governments are hurting. That affects everything from cops to teachers to firefighters to our small businesses. In New Jersey, we've got 14% unemployment, 22% of independent restaurants, small restaurants have gone out of business. I mean, it's really affecting our communities, our schools. We need more resources for testing. You name it, it's in the package. And that was sort of, to be honest with you, what our hope was to just get this conversation moving. And the fact that the White House and the Treasury Secretary have said today this has been key to helping them get back to the table. And I know that they're close. This new package, the Democrats that we put out, is in strike zone. And so I think I don't know if you just saw this, Tom, but it looks like the plan the White House is putting out has boosters or escalators, they're calling them, that takes us to 2 trillion, which is basically where we were, right? The 1.5 to 2 trillion. So that's exactly what, that's pretty close to the 2.2. So now the question is, can we get it over the finish line here? And there's some small things and small differences that has to be worked out, I'm sure. But I think, between the Secretary Mnuchin and the White House and the Chief of Staff and the Speaker and of course the Senate, it's doable. And that's really what's got to happen in these next hours.
So you mentioned hours. There's just a few days left before the House is supposed to go on recess or to leave before the election. So there's just not a lot of time here. The Speaker's already said that she plans to hold a vote on the proposal the Democrats have put out. And then it looks like you guys could be gone while American workers, American businesses are still on the job. What do you guys think should happen if there is no deal?
Well, Alon, I just don't accept that. And obviously Pelosi said the speaker said, we're not leaving DC till a deal is done on COVID. And that's what she said when we put the Problem Solvers Caucus proposal out. And I think that we should hold her accountable to those words. And my hope is, and that's breaking news that Josh just quoted there, that is exactly right out of the Problem Solvers Caucus proposal, those escalators and those reducers that we're talking about. And so hopefully what we will see is if they vote on the House bill, this Democratic bill, that we immediately also have the opportunity to vote on what the White House is proposing. And why we could do that, here in the next days, 24 hours, 48 hours, is because the substantive policy of the relief is pretty well vetted. That's why when over 6 weeks, we were able to put this package together, and why we can do this over the next 24 hours and 48 hours is because we know where the policy substantive needs are. It's a matter of dials and coming to an agreement to get through the election and into the next year. And so it's about negotiating those dials and coming up with a deal that we can get done. And so I'm very confident that if there's a will to do it, we could vote on it in the House here in the next 24 to 48 hours, get this taken care of. So then the Senate has to do their job. And I would rightfully join with Josh, just as I'm holding the speaker accountable, to hold Mitch McConnell accountable as a Republican and say, you know what? We got the White House, we got the speaker to agree, Mitch McConnell and Republicans. We also need to agree and do our part for the American people and deliver this to the president's desk. Now, I know these conversations are happening behind the scenes, so everybody knows what is being negotiated. So if we get this through the House, I'm confident that once it gets to the Senate, politically and substantively, it being the right thing to do, politically, you don't want to hold back this relief to so many people that are suffering and potentially looking at layoffs and everything else that's coming down the pipeline. I'm confident we can get this done.
And I agree. I mean, I'm not going to operate in the world that doesn't get done. I'm going to operate in the world that it will get done. And we're going to fight very hard to help get it over the finish line. These things are, the key is, and Lon, this really gets back to sort of where you started this conversation. You have to, what we've recognized over the last years working together is you have to start by accepting that you're not going to get every single thing you want. And if you expect 100% purity every time you go into a conversation like this, then you'll literally never legislate. And especially in an era of divided government where you've got a White House and a Senate that's Republican and a House that's Democrat. If you want to get anything done, you're going to both have to be willing to give a little bit. But the question is, can you get most of what you want? And I think that's how most people live their lives, right? And I know, Tom, in your district, with all your small business owners, and that's how they live their lives. You've got to fight. You fight. You try to work hard to build your business, and it means you don't always get everything you want, but you stay at the table until you're able to get most of what you want. And I think government should operate the same way.
So, Congressman Reed, how do you take the personal out of it? I mean, I think that we've seen over the past half hour or so that you guys do have a real friendship, but how do you remove sort of your own personal passion from some of these arguments, and how do you guys handle that within the caucus itself?
Well, Alon, I think it's like in these manufacturers and these business owners that are on this call can attest to, and in my private life, and Josh comes from the private sector as well, going into this public sector. It's all about relationship building, right? It's about getting to know each other as people. And what this town in DC has failed to do and has gotten away from is spending the time together across the aisle with each other. And I've had some mentors in my life, and people on this call will know these people. People like Amo Houghton, God rest his soul, we just lost him. He served in this seat for 18 years. He was the CEO of Corning Incorporated. His family started Corning Incorporated, a great company that's in my hometown of Corning. I talk to Amo all the time, and one of the pieces of advice he says, get to know people down there. Get to know people across the aisle. Him and John Lewis, God rest his soul, they're up in heaven now, joining hands again. The way they became great friends on the Ways and Means Committee that they served on together and traveled the world together. Get to know some people, get to know them, get to know their hearts, get to know who their families are, get to know who their folks are. And people like Bob Michaels, he was a great leader out of Illinois. I got to know him when I first got here. People like John Boehner, he and I come from a similar background. He's 1 of 12, I'm 1 of 12. He came from nothing. He was the son of a barkeeper. I'm the son of a mom who raised 12 kids when her husband died at 48 on a Social Security check and a military death benefit check. We came from nothing. Why I'm sitting here is God's grace. I don't know why I'm here. I'm just following the path and doing the best I can with what I have. And what you have to do is you have to get to know each other. And that's what we've done in the caucus. So when we get into these passionate fights, we know it's not personal. We know it's about just who we are trying to fight for people and have that respectful debate. And when we walk out of the room, we're still friends. We're still Americans. We're still, a Republican and a Democrat. But at the end of the day, we know we had the battle, but we did it with the right demeanor, the right respect, the right purpose. Not just because you wanted to have 5 minutes on CNBC or you wanted to be on Fox News or MSNBC. So you threw out bombs so that you could play
CNBC
politics.
doesn't do bomb throwing.
That's true.
That's why they're a good station.
We do
That's right.
policy throwing.
We do policy. That's right, Alon, I know that. But some of our members are more motivated by that. And also there's members that are motivated that truly won't make that effort. And I can remember it. They're like, I won't talk to that son of a gun over there because he's that. One of the things we do in the Problem Solvers Caucus that allows this to happen is we don't campaign against a fellow member of the Problem Solvers Caucus on the other side. That is an old lesson out of the Senate, where you can't be having a negotiation and a relationship where if the person across the aisle from you has an ad running against you or is funding a campaign against you where they're calling you the biggest SOB that's ever existed on the face of the earth and trying to take out your future potential career. That doesn't work. And so what we do is we have this mutual respect for each other and don't attack each other.
One of the policy areas on which Democrats and Republicans do appear to agree is on manufacturing. It's something that is a central plank of both Joe Biden's platform, Donald Trump's platform. What are some of the things that the Problem Solvers Caucus has done to incentivize manufacturing, to incentivize building in America and bringing jobs back to this country? Josh.
Well, it's the amount of policy that affects, frankly, manufacturing, that affects business in the country that we've been involved in. It's hard to pin it down to one thing, but I'll tell you the one that I remember the most was last year during the government shutdown, and then I'll cover different ones like the eliminating the Cadillac tax, which was key to health insurance and getting costs down for health insurance, which is very important to small businesses. But the one I remember the most is going over to the White House during the government shutdown. If you remember, it was the beginning of the Congress and the government was shut down, things were stuck. And that was having a huge impact on our economy and on businesses, and government was just closed, and both sides weren't talking to each other. So we went immediately over to the White House, to the Situation Room, and sat half Democrat, half Republican with the President of the United States to talk about how do we fix things? How do we get the government reopened? And it was a really eye-opening meeting in terms of when you started to talk, you realize that in a lot of places, we actually weren't that far apart. And we were able to go back to leadership and both sides go back to our respective leaderships and try to help get things unstuck. And, I think we helped. And as a result, government was able to get open. And if you look at what we're working on right now on COVID, and we put a back to work proposal together out in the height of the crisis, talking about how we get to back to work safely and get businesses reopened and help people and get more resources for PPP and for our small businesses, which are obviously crucial resources to help get businesses back open. So on our fights for getting healthcare, making healthcare more affordable, to more resource for PPP and reopening safely, to getting the government reopened, which is causing an economic strain on our country. I mean, those are just the first three that come to my mind. Tom, I'm sure you have 10 others in your head, but I just wanted to throw those out.
So Alon, no, that's exactly it. We are the go-to place for getting things done. We changed the rules of the House to allow for consideration of bills at the beginning of this Congress. We banded together as the Problem Solvers Caucus and said to our leadership on both sides of the aisle, said, we're not going to elect the next speaker who doesn't embrace reforming the rules of the House to allow when we get to a consensus point of 290 co-sponsors on a piece of legislation, that piece of legislation doesn't have an opportunity to be voted on, up or down, on the floor of the House. You would be amazed how many times that type of consensus piece of legislation was blocked because of personal animosity, because of petty political differences or political posturing that was being utilized to keep that from getting a political win to the other side. And so we changed the rules of the House. And I remember Dick Gephardt talked to both Josh and I and just said, you know what, you guys can retire now. You guys did in the Problem Solvers Caucus as members of Congress, something that very few members of Congress can do and something that hasn't been done in 70 years. You left your fingerprints on the institution of the House of Representatives in a positive way. And we've had legislation passed through there. Gold Star mothers had a technical problem under our tax code. Those are the people that have lost loved ones in our military and hostile environments who were killed in action, essentially, that were penalized because of a technical problem with the tax code. That was being blocked up for 9 years. 9 years was blocked up and couldn't get through the system because of the person that was authoring that bill. We got that through the system, signed into law because of that reform that we did. I use that as an example of many pieces of legislation that got done because of that rule reform package that we did. And that's just one example of a lot more.
There are a lot of really thorny issues that the caucus has tackled and that you guys have tackled personally. Are there any topics that you all have had to just put aside because you couldn't get enough members on board to find the areas of agreement? What if you had to save for later, maybe, let's say?
Mm-hmm. I'll give you two examples because it's a fair point. So there are things, I mean, remember, we're proud Republicans and proud Democrats, and there's things that potentially we can't get to. So, you know, we had a situation, we had Parkland happen. You know, Parkland shooting was horrific. And I'll give you the downside of that story, and I'll give you the upside of that story when it came to the Problem Solvers Caucus. So there was an immediate push, you know, obviously to go after gun rights and Second Amendment issues. And we just, that was a path that you were not going to be able to get to consensus on. But I do remember that time vividly because as human beings, we responded to that, both sides, Democrat and Republican, said, well, I mean, we can't go down attacking the Second Amendment and taking away our Second Amendment rights because we're not going to be able to find that consensus. I'm a proud supporter of the Second Amendment. I passionately believe in the Second Amendment. That's a fundamental constitutional right. But what it led to was a secondary conversation where we said, okay, well, Tom, and I remember members saying this, I understand where you're coming from. I hear where you're coming from, but what can we agree on? And then it opened up a conversation on gun safety. And it opened up a conversation on school resource officers and additional money to try to make sure that our schools were safe. And that opened up the door that actually got a bill signed into law that we got behind as the Problem Solvers Caucus that didn't get into the issue of that Second Amendment division issue that couldn't find consensus, but we brought consensus on the secondary issues that we could agree upon that I think has done a lot to help our schools become safer, help our issues of school resources with community policing and things like that become safer, because that got billions of dollars flowing to our institutions across the country. And so that is one area. The other area was tax reform. You know, we have, when we did tax reform, I was a firm believer we should have done that with 60 votes in the Senate, and we should have got together and we should have tried to work this out in a bipartisan basis, because as we saw with healthcare and other issues, when you do these with one party only type of major legislation, they don't withstand the test of time. It is not the way to go down the path, but we just couldn't get there. There were fundamental issues that dealt with how to get it through to the finish line. And it was just clear we weren't going to be able to get to 75% consensus on an overall tax package. And so we weren't able to do that. And we just walked away recognizing that this is going to be a battle that we're going to have to deal with. And as we go forward on tax reform, you know, we're coming up on the 5-year sunsets and things like that, that we're going to have to come together to make permanent, because I don't think anybody wants to raise taxes on individuals. Nobody wants to raise taxes on small businesses. These guys are struggling enough. So I think the Problem Solvers Caucus is going to have to come together and fix this problem of these expiring provisions that we see on the horizon and say, you know what, we should have done this to begin with, but because we couldn't get to a consensus then, maybe now it's time for us to get consensus and fix these for the individuals and businesses that are going to suffer as a result of the expiring provisions in the tax code.
Congressman Gottheimer?
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest one that I can think of. It's on it's sometimes it's really tough. There's just issues that right away. Listen, because of our ideological differences, you could spend 500 hours together in a room and you're not going to move. And often when we work on COVID relief, and we worked on last I guess 2 years ago, a massive way to rethink healthcare, and we put out an immigration package. Those each took hundreds of hours, but we knew early on, yeah, if we work this hard enough, I bet we can find a place where we could land. Sometimes, like as Tom said, we actually recognized very early on tax reform that we were just in different places. And I was a big believer in keeping SALT, the state and local tax deduction, and that was an issue for others. And it just we spent a bunch of hours on it, but we then realized we're not going to be able to get there. And that's by the way, that's okay too, but we did it respectfully. And I guess that's kind of the key. We sat in a room together, we worked together, we put up whiteboards. We often get tacos and beer late at night after we're done working. It's 10 o'clock. We sit in a room when you're allowed to sit in a room together and put up the boards and work. And then, after a while, you'll know I can't really see where we're going to get there. And that's good. That's what you should do. And as Tom said, even on Parkland, when Tom and I totally remember where I was when I called Tom, and because a bunch of our Democrats called and said, do you think we can work on this? And I said, I don't know. That's a very tricky one. That's one of those where you might spend hundreds of hours and not move. And I called Tom, and Tom said, give me a minute. And he called around. I remember, and he came back and said, let's give it a shot. I said, okay, great. Let's give it a shot. And so we sat in a room together, and, listen, there was plenty that we didn't find agreement on that I wish we did. But we found places where we could agree, and we got, as Tom said, we actually got stuff done. People don't realize we helped get legislation passed. And when we did criminal justice reform, that's one of those issues people thought, no way you could actually get Democrats and Republicans to agree. And we did, right? And it was a wild cast of characters that came into the room to try to help us get that done, and from both sides. And we did, and it's more to the point. And I think people, Tom, I'm sure people in your district feel this way. You just gotta talk to each other and get to know each other and build relationships and trust. And it's amazing what you can do, even if you know how to disagree. And I wish last night we had more of this in the debate, just disagreeing more respectfully. But you can do it if you actually have the relationships to have the frank conversations. And when I call Tom, I'll say to him, Tom, you think there's any way? He'll often say to me, no way, Josh, no way. It's just, I'll check, but I doubt it. And that's why he's come back to me in both ways, right? I mean, Tom will call me and say, what do you think? And I'll say, no way, no. That's unicorns, man. I don't think we're gonna be able to pull that off. I think even we can't pull that off. And so,
Well, let me just take a pause here and ask Allison whether there are any questions from the audience that folks would like to get in.
We do have one. We do have one. I'm going to combine a couple. Some have already been answered, but a lot of people have been wondering, and this is a particular question: how can somebody at the local level support the type of bipartisan work that the PSC is doing while looking at the leaders that we have and it seeming so divisive, especially watching the presidential debate last night? How can local people support this type of movement?
Congressman Reed?
Well, I will tell you, we have to elect leaders like Josh, and I hope you would agree, folks like us that are making sure that this type of governing is rewarded, because it's not always rewarded. You need to understand what we're pushing up against of what we're doing, changing the rules, trying to use the power, not in political purposes, but for the people first. It's running counter to how DC is wired right now. And that political industrial complex is pushing back on us in a very aggressive way. And so you got to make sure you stand with elected officials and folks that are willing to commit to this. The good news is it's paying dividends. It's actually working. And there's a silent majority of folks that are coming to our aid, that are standing with us. And so I will go to Josh's district and I will actually campaign for Josh. I get kind of chastised from my Republican colleagues and stuff like that. And they'll be like, why are you helping out Josh Gottheimer? I go, because, and because he's on the Democratic side, they'll say, I say, because he's a good guy. And I'm sick and tired of just electing people just to add a number to the ranks. And I'll defend him and I will protect him. And I will say, to his folks, that you need to elect Josh back to the office because he's doing the job right. And he is representing you right. And so you need to do that. So there's ways to do that. Go to the Problem Solvers Caucus website. We got our own website. You can sign up on the website, follow our work, support the work, raise the voice of the caucus and share it with folks around the country, around the different districts of the members that are there. Get your social media networks wired into it so that we can grow the voice of what we're doing. The other good news that's happening is we are now networked with about 8 senators that we're working with on a regular basis. Every week we talk with them. We develop a relationship. Over the last year and a half, they're spending about an hour to 2 hours with us on a regular basis, and have 8 senators give you that much time each week to a House member. Unheard of in my tenure in Congress. I mean, literally, if they give you 5 minutes, they think they're doing you a favor. And don't tell them I said that. But to give an hour, and now we're coordinating with each other. We're working with each other. Where can we help each other to get this stuff through, get it through the Senate, get it through the House, and get it signed by the president and taken care of? That is very powerful. And so you sign up problemsolverscaucus.com or whatever it is, put that in, you'll see where the website is, and help us out.
Bipartisan and potentially bicameral as well. Congressman Gottheimer, your thoughts on what people at the local level can do to work across the aisle?
Well, first, if they're not in our districts, and I know this is being shared with a bunch of people who are outside Tom's district and my district, ask your member of Congress, and to say you should get involved in this. Are you getting involved in this? What are you doing? Do you work with the other side? Encourage that. Far too often these days, as Tom said, all folks here is when they go online, or if they're at a coffee shop, it's about attacking the other side, revving them up, how bad the other side is. They probably don't get enough positive feedback about working the other side. I know it's interesting how many people come up to me who are from the other party and say, hey, we disagree on plenty. When I'm home, I'll hear this, but I really appreciate that you try to actually get things done with the other side. And so I hear that, frankly, I hear that at home all the time. People don't get upset that we work the other side. They think that that's what our job should be. So I think you got to give let your member of Congress know that it's a thing that we want more of in this country. We don't want the screaming. We don't want the tweeting. We don't want the nastiness. We want the substantive conversations. I mean, Alon, what's amazing about CNBC, one of the reasons that I happen to really like the channel is because if you turn it on, you can actually see a substantive conversation that's not just talking heads yelling at each other. And I frankly, that's what we need more of in this country, to take the temperature down, talk about the issues. You can disagree about philosophical approach. That's fine. That's what's good. You get to pick a side, but it's the idea that we can, as Americans, have a really good substantive conversation. As Tom always says, back home in his district, those are the kind of values that are really important to the people he represents. And I think we just need more of that here.
So as you guys have alluded to, and I think everyone is anxiously awaiting for, there is an election happening in how many weeks now? 5 weeks or so?
I heard.
So I just want to end with this, which is obviously two different sides of the aisle, two different potential outcomes after the election in November. But where do you each hope the country will be 6 months after the election, a year after the election? Can you share what you think we can achieve in terms of the level of discourse? And we'll leave it there. Congressman Gottheimer.
Well, I'm hopeful. First of all, everyone should vote. Please vote. Get a flu shot and vote. Those are my things. And I think it's really, really important, regardless who you're going to vote for. Just please engage. It's critically important. This is obviously a very important election. 1, 2. I'm hoping that when you have us back on and on your show together, and months from now, I hope that I'm still here to be able to represent the people of the 5th district. So, and B, and that Tom is too. And that I just think our country overall needs to just take it down a few notches. We've been through so much over these last months with COVID and the health crisis and the economic crisis. And obviously, if you're on the West Coast, the fires, and we've had a lot to deal with as a country. It's a very high stressful time economically on families, and we all just need to come together. And I'm hoping, even with our disagreements, we can unite more and recognize that our differences in our country have always been our greatest strength, and that we really focus on where we can agree more and how great we are as a country, instead of screaming and yelling and tweeting and going on cable news and yelling, because I think the country needs a break.
Congressman Reed, you have the last word.
Yeah, on the last word, I hope 6 months from now and a year from now, what we'll have done is, as a country, taken a deep breath. We will have gotten our legs under us, and this divisiveness, there will be leaders such as Josh and myself and members of the Problem Solvers Caucus who have risen to the top and led the country through this divisive time. And people are more focused on being Americans and standing together, having the debate, doing it respectfully, and then start putting the American people's interests first and not political power positioning. Because once this election is over, 6 months to a year from now, I can assure you, if we stay in this state, what they're going to start fighting about is the next election. And that always happens in this town. Who's going to be in power in the midterm? Who's going to be in power 4 years from now? We have to get away from that. And my final hope is that the country will be in a spot where the American spirit is rekindled, so that the American people don't lose faith in the American system and the American Constitution. Because I get a sense that a lot of folks, especially after last night, are kind of like tuning out, especially the next generation, where they're like, wow, this is not something I want to participate in. I'm just going to disengage from the democratic process and not participate. That's when the country potentially dies. And I can tell you that is not going to happen on our watch, and it cannot happen on the next watch, because America's greatness is really based on her people and her Constitution, and what the founding fathers envisioned so many years ago, when they were just looking for an opportunity to live their lives in freedom and have an opportunity for their children and their grandchildren to have a better life. And we can't lose sight of this. As they said back then, democracy's hard. But it's the best government that's ever existed and will exist on the face of the earth, because it provides freedom, not only to America, but to the world. And so we need to be that beacon of hope for generations to come, and we cannot disengage. So for a year from now, I hope there's a rekindling of a commitment to America that says, you know what, she's worth fighting for. Let's all engage and stand up to the extremism, stand up to the political class, and say, you know what, it's time for the people to take control again and put elected officials in power who are statesmen and who are committed to putting the people's interests first each and every day.
Great, and that's a wonderful summary from both of you. Congressman Gottheimer, thank you for joining us. Congressman Reed, thank you for having me and for hosting what was really a very interesting and fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Lon. Thank you, Tom, for having me.
Josh, you're the best. Love you, brother.
Take care, man.